The first time they saw him, he was little more than a shadow cut against the sunburned horizon, dust-slicked boots, worn canvas satchel, and a face that hadn't seen a mirror in weeks. The wind that trailed him carried the smell of iron and, cactus sap, the kind of scent that only clung to those who had walked deserts alone. He didn't speak as he crossed into the camp, didn't flinch when 2 security guards flanked his steps. He just raised a calloused hand and pointed to the shovel rack like he knew exactly where it was. No one paid him real attention at first. In a dig site full of broken men hoping for one more paycheck, one more dry meal, one more chance to not matter, he was just another ghost on the payroll, until he wasn't. The camp sat 37 miles from the nearest paved road, a series of tents, modular trailers, and shipping containers carved into the ribcage of an abandoned mining village. It had once pulsed with life during the first diamond rush of the 1930s, then the rubies in the 1960s, and now something far older was being unearthed. Relics, skeletal engravings, whispers of civilizations that left no known language, only silent warnings in obsidian. The team had permits, grants, security, but they didn't have trust. Tensions were thick, whispers of sabotage and theft were buried under bureaucratic shrugs. No one spoke openly. No one stayed long. The stranger said his name was Evan. No surname, no ID. He offered to dig, haul, fix things, anything in exchange for a cot. The site manager, a greasy pragmatist named Colby Rusk, laughed. But the laughter died when Evan adjusted the angle of a dig platform just by eye and stopped it from collapsing during a sudden shift. After that, he was tolerated. Nothing more. He kept to himself, eating alone, scribbling into a water-stained notebook. He didn't use a phone, didn't flinch when scorpions crawled over his boots at night. A few of the junior archaeologists joked that he was a ghost, a military dropout, or one of those oil-rich freaks who faked poverty to find meaning. But mostly they ignored him. Until the day the storm came. That evening, the sky turned the color of rotting bruises. Winds kicked up from the south, peeling tarps and rattling the equipment crates. The crew scrambled to secure the artifacts into the main tent, the only structure with reinforced walls. It was during that chaos that Evan lingered near the restricted area, a zone holding relics not yet catalogued, where only those with clearance could go. Rusk spotted him too late. "What the hell are you doing near Vault B?" Rusk bellowed, his boots pounding across the gravel. But Evan didn't look startled. He turned slowly, eyes calm as glass, and handed Rusk a piece of parchment. It wasn't real parchment, it was a napkin. On it, in perfect lines, was a sketch, an object no one outside the vault had seen. It was an ornate stone compass, etched, with unfamiliar runes, and a broken quadrant that historians believed acted as a timekeeper. The sketch was flawless, down to the fracture near its base. Rusk stared at it for a long moment, his lips dry. "Who showed you this?" he asked. "No one," Evan replied. That night, Rusk doubled the guards. Word spread quickly. No one could explain how the drifter had seen the artifact. Some said he was spying through equipment cracks. Others claimed he had stolen photographs. But even the senior archivist confirmed there were no external records. Nothing had been uploaded. The sketch wasn't a copy. It was from memory. The whispers returned. This time they curved around Evan's cot. People began watching him closely. How he walked, how he touched the sand before sunrise, how he listened instead of spoke. And when one of the mechanical diggers malfunctioned near the ancient well, it was Evan who rigged a pulley from scratch using wire and bone nails. No one had taught him that, and no one understood why he knew the well's depth within inches before anyone measured it. A week later, a young tech assistant named Dina found a page from Evan's notebook left on a supply crate. It wasn't a mistake. He had written it deliberately, coordinates, a timeline, and one phrase. "There's more buried beneath the tent." But there were 5 tents. Which one? They confronted him at dinner, a loose half-circle of wary men and women, faces lit by solar lanterns and suspicion. He looked at them all with the calm of someone who had been waiting to be caught. "You think I'm here to steal from you?" he said softly, the firelight catching the sharp bones of his face. "You think I'm poor, but if I told you I funded..." This dig 4 years ago under a dead company's name, you'd laugh harder than you ever have. No one spoke. Only Rusk narrowed his eyes. And yet, Evan continued, pulling a raw, uncut stone from his satchel, so dirty it looked like a hunk of glass. Here we are. I only have one question. He paused, lifting the stone high enough for the lamplight to glint faintly against its facets. The air stilled. Any diamond cutters in the tent? Silence held the camp like a clenched jaw, the kind that presses down on nerves and breath until someone dares to speak, and no one did. The rough stone sat in Evan's hand like a dare, its dull shimmer betraying its value only to those who knew what they were looking at. For most it was a dirty shard of nothing, but the few who understood, geologists, historians, those who had once glimpsed raw beauty beneath layers of earth, knew it for what it was. A diamond, untouched, pure, and unexplainable. The following morning, 2 things happened before breakfast. First, Rusk quietly ordered a full sweep of Evan's belongings, his satchel, his cot, even the toilets near his tent. Second, the camp's only satellite internet uplink went down. At first, the team blamed the storm's aftershock, but by midday the tech engineer admitted something no one wanted to hear. The system had been manually disabled, not by nature, but by an internal command. Someone inside the perimeter didn't want them talking to the outside world. As suspicion seeped through the narrow alleys of the excavation grid, Evan returned to work like nothing had happened. He shoveled dirt, carried crates, jotted unreadable notes in his battered journal. The rest of the team eyed him like a ticking device. The only person who dared approach was Dinah, the tech assistant with a knack for puzzles and an eye for detail. "You're not from around here," she said casually, walking beside him as he sorted through brush near a collapsed trench. Not just geographically. He didn't respond right away. Just moved a chunk of limestone, revealing a snake skeleton tangled in copper wiring, clearly placed, not fossilized. "You read the note I left," he said eventually, more observation than question. She hesitated. "Yeah, there's nothing beneath tent 3 except sand." He turned to her then, and for the first time his eyes held something close to respect. "That's because you didn't dig deep enough." "What are you really looking for?" she asked. He wiped his hands on his pants, revealing a palm scarred with old burns. "I'm not looking anymore," he murmured. "I'm verifying." Before she could ask what that meant, Rusk's voice bellowed through the camp loudspeakers, summoning all staff to Tent 1. "Mandatory security update," he said. Dinah glanced at Evan, but he was already walking away, the compass-shaped medallion dangling from his neck catching the light just enough to make her pause. Inside Tent 1, the mood was thick. Guards lined the walls. Rusk stood near a projector, screen displaying a map of the site, grid lines, excavation zones, artifact markers. Most had seen it 100 times, but this time, a new layer of markings blinked in red, coordinates that no one had logged. These were found on a loose page, Rusk announced, lifting a familiar napkin with the same compass sketch Evan had given him days earlier. Coordinates beneath Tent 3, same zone that registered unusual magnetic feedback last week. Dinah's eyes flicked to Evan, who stood at the back, arms crossed, utterly still. "We've closed Tent 3 for the next 48 hours while we conduct a controlled dig," Rusk continued. "Anyone unauthorized who enters will be removed from the site. That includes temporary laborers and guests." Guests. The word clanged against the minds of the crew. No one was supposed to be a guest here. That night, unease settled over the camp. Guards patrolled more aggressively. Radios crackled with interference, and Evan disappeared. His cot untouched, satchel gone, footprints erased by wind. Rusk ordered a search party, but not out of concern. He wanted the diamond back or whatever else Evan had stolen, but nothing was missing from inventory until the vault was opened. Vault B, the sealed archive of unreleased finds, had always required biometric clearance. Only 3 people had access: Rusk, the head historian, and the Swiss financial auditor, scheduled to arrive next week. And yet, when they opened it the next morning, one of the key artifacts, the ancient stone compass, was gone. In its place sat a perfect replica, indistinguishable at first glance but lighter, hollow. Only Dina suspected the truth. She spent the day reviewing security footage and noticed something strange. The cameras near Vault B glitched for exactly 7 minutes. Same time frame the uplink went dark, and during that window, a flicker of light passed across the sensor, like a mirror angled deliberately to blind it. A trick only someone trained would know. She waited until the camp slept, then crept toward Tent 3, guided by the coordinates Evan had scribbled. She didn't need to dig far. Just beneath the canvas flooring she found a metal hatch, sealed, scorched, ancient, not from any modern construction. Etched into its frame was the same symbol that had adorned the compass, a broken eye weeping. The hatch was locked, but someone had recently oiled the hinges. When she turned to retreat, she found Evan waiting beside her, face unreadable. "I knew you'd find it," he said. Dina stepped back, heart racing. "What is this?" He held up a small device, part satellite modem, part scanner. The light blinked green. "You wanted to know what I'm looking for?" he said. "This isn't just a dig site, it's a keyhole. The diamond was just the first test." "A test for what?" she whispered. Evan glanced upward toward the stars now veiled by sand haze, to see who's watching and who's willing to get their hands dirty. Then he knelt and began to open the hatch. Below them something clicked, mechanical, deliberate, old. In the distance a second generator went down, and the silence between pickaxes deepened into something else entirely. Something waiting. The hatch opened with a groan that sounded like it hadn't echoed in centuries. A breath of stale, mineral-saturated air hissed from below, colder than the desert should have allowed. Dina stepped back, 1 foot ready to run, but Evan moved with certainty. He didn't hesitate, just retrieved a weathered flashlight from his belt and disappeared down the rusted ladder into the dark. For a long moment, she stood above the opening, torn between instinct and curiosity. Then she followed. The descent was longer than it should have been. 40, maybe 50 feet below the desert surface, the ladder ended at a stone platform, smooth, clean, untouched by sand. The walls were lined with symbols like the ones on the compass, except these were larger, deeper, and marked with something metallic that shimmered in the beam of her light. Evan didn't speak. He moved with the ease of someone returning home, his fingers brushing the carvings like braille. "How did you find this?" Dina asked quietly, her voice swallowed by the chamber's acoustics. "I didn't," he replied. "I remembered it." Before she could question him, he pressed his palm against a square depression on the wall. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the floor beneath them shifted. Not a jolt, but a graceful motion, circular and slow, revealing an inner chamber lit by faint blue luminescence. At its center stood a pedestal, and on it rested another diamond, this one perfectly cut, glowing faintly, humming like a live wire. Dina's breath caught. "That's not possible. There's no power down here." "It's not electrical," Evan said. "It's reactive, to pressure, to sound, to intent." She turned to him. "You're not a miner, and you're definitely not a drifter. So who are you?" He met her gaze, and for the first time his expression cracked, not into a smirk or a riddle, but something almost human. "I'm the reason this entire site exists." In the silence that followed, Dina processed what he didn't say. He wasn't just a sponsor. He wasn't just funding the operation under a shell company. He had designed it, controlled it, like a puppeteer watching his stage from the wings. He handed her a chip, black, sleek, encrypted. "Take this," he said. "Upload it when the uplink returns. It contains the original dig authorization papers, signed 5 years ago. Look at the signatures," she frowned, pocketing it. "Why?" "Because one of them doesn't exist anymore, and the other is lying to you. Back on the surface, the camp was unraveling. The missing compass had triggered panic among investors. Rusk was under pressure to account for its disappearance. And when the guards discovered the signal jamming device tucked behind the generator, rigged by someone who clearly knew military hardware, suspicion exploded. A list of suspects narrowed quickly, and Evan's name surged to the top. Dina returned to her tent just before dawn. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't stop seeing the diamond in her mind, glowing, alive. She examined the chip under a magnifier. It bore no corporate logo, just a single engraving on its side, an arrow looping back on itself. She recognized the symbol from one of the old scrolls recovered weeks ago, believed to represent eternal return in a forgotten dialect. She didn't sleep. Instead, she waited until the uplink flickered back to life and ran the chip through a scrub terminal in the surveyor's shack. The documents loaded instantly: internal memos, funding allocations, geological scans that predated the public, discovery of the site. But what made her blood freeze was the first signature, Evan M. Cartwright, and beneath it, Colby Rusk, with a date, 7 years ago. She stormed into the comms trailer, slamming the door behind her. Rusk looked up from a call, startled by her expression. "You knew," she spat. "You've known since the beginning." His mouth twitched. "Watch your tone. You signed off on this dig before the land was even marked, with Evan Cartwright, except the reports say he died in a plane crash 5 years ago. So either you faked a signature, or you've been lying about his death." Rusk's composure shifted. "You're in way over your head, Dina. You think this is about diamonds and dirt. It's about leverage, ownership, legacy. He's alive." Rusk leaned forward. "Then I need him found, before someone else realizes what he buried here." She left before he could say more. That night, she found Evan again, this time near the edge of the camp, his eyes fixed on the desert like it was a map he'd memorized. "He's hunting you," she said. "I expected that," Evan replied, "but what he doesn't know is the clock's already ticking." He unrolled a map unlike anything she'd seen, topographical, but layered with heat signatures, echo points, and underground vein paths. At the center, circled in red, was Tent 3, but beneath it, spiraling like a vortex, were chambers, dozens of them. "This isn't one dig site," he said. "It's a vault, one built by an ancient guild of cutters and merchants who used the land to hide knowledge inside minerals, messages encrypted inside crystalline structures. That diamond? It wasn't glowing, it was transmitting." Dina stared at him, stunned. "I need you to make a choice," he continued. "You can give Rusk what he wants, walk away with enough money to buy out your life, or you help me break the seal on the next chamber. And what happens then?" He smiled faintly. "Then we stop pretending the world is still what we think it is." Far beneath their feet, in the silence that diamonds had kept for centuries, another mechanism clicked into place. Another light flickered on, and the coordinates began to shift. It began with vibrations, soft, arrhythmic pulses that trembled beneath the soles of their boots. At first, the crew thought it was another generator, misfiring, or the wind kicking loose gravel against the tent lines. But then the vibrations became rhythmic, almost musical, like a coded heartbeat rising from the sand. Evan had gone still the moment it started, head tilted like he recognized the pattern. Dina stood beside him, clutching the map he'd shown. Her the night before, her breath shallow. "It's unlocked," he said. They moved quickly, too quickly for it to look casual. Slipping through the dim camp as pre-dawn light bled over the hills, they passed still sleeping tents and twitching surveillance cameras. By the time they reached Tent 3, the vibrations had stopped. In their place, silence, thick and expectant, Evan unzipped the canvas flap and ducked inside. The hatch was open, but now so was the floor beneath it. Where there had been stone, there was now a descending spiral of steps carved into rock, lit faintly by veins of bioluminescent minerals. The air smelled of metal and water and time. Dina hesitated, her instinct screaming that no field manual had prepared her for this. "Why now?" she whispered. Evan knelt at the edge of the steps and reached into his pocket. He pulled out the old compass, the original, the one he'd allegedly stolen from Vault B. But now, as he turned its face toward the descent, it pulsed with the same strange blue as the minerals. "It's not just a compass," he said. "It's a key. And a recorder." They descended. The spiral staircase wound down farther than they expected, leading into a chamber shaped like a cut gem, octagonal, with walls that shimmered under the compass's glow. There were no artifacts, no carvings, just flat surfaces, lined with crystalline tiles and a pedestal in the center, embedded with a socket shaped precisely for the compass. Evan placed it there. At first, nothing happened. Then the walls began to change, Each tile flickered, revealing images, maps, diagrams, time-lapse sequences of cities rising and collapsing, veins of minerals forming under pressure. A sequence played on loop, a set of hands cutting a raw stone, each facet triggering a reaction, each slice recording a data point. Ancient technology, geometric memory stored in the Earth's own bones. Evan watched it all unfold with a quiet reverence. "Grandfather used to talk about this," he said. "He was a gem cutter. He told me about legends of the guild. The original cutters who weren't just craftsmen but custodians. They didn't cut diamonds for jewelry. They cut them to store messages, data, secrets." "And you believe he was telling the truth?" Dina asked. Evan turned to her. "I know he was. He died trying to find this place." The tiles shifted again, now displaying images from the modern dig site. Camera angles, personnel logs, timestamps. Someone had been recording everything for years, even conversations, even betrayals. One tile showed Rusk in an office speaking to a man with a blurred face. The audio feed played low but clear enough. "Once we confirm the second vault, I want Cartwright eliminated." Quietly. "If he's really alive, he's a liability. He knows too much." Dina clenched her jaw. Another tile showed blueprints, buildings not yet constructed, marked with corporate logos and mineral rights. Rusk wasn't just managing the dig, he was preparing to sell the land to a private conglomerate once the vault was open. The relics, the artifacts, the buried history, they were just PR bait. "This is why he sabotaged the uplink," Evan muttered, "to delay outside access until his buyers arrived." "Then we release this," Dina said, stepping forward. Evan nodded. He reached for the compass to extract the data, but as his fingers brushed the pedestal, the tiles flickered violently, and the light died. An alarm blared, muffled, distant, and human. From above. "They know," Dina whispered. They raced. Back up the spiral. But when they emerged into Tent 3, the camp was no longer asleep. Guards swarmed the perimeter. Rusk stood at the center, barking orders. The moment he saw them, he pointed. "Detain them." They ran, into the dunes, into the gorge behind the supply trailers, into the old mining shafts that once belonged to the diamond barons of another century. Evan knew the terrain too well. Dina followed without question. They didn't stop until they reached a collapsed tunnel where an old crate of core samples had been abandoned. Evan ripped it open and dug through the samples until he found it. A shard of clear diamond with an etching so fine it looked like dust. He held it up to the morning light. "This is the real key," he said. "The compass was just the decoder. This stores everything." "How do we use it?" Dina asked, breathless. "We don't," he said. "Not here." He pulled a satellite beacon from his jacket, hidden in a sewn-in lining. It blinked. "Green. We transmit it, but we need a clean signal. That means the uplink tower on the ridge." "That's suicide," she said. "Not if we split up," he replied, handing her the compass. "They won't expect you to move toward the tower. They'll come for me." She hesitated, then gripped the compass tight and nodded. They parted at the edge of the gorge. Within minutes, Rusk's men found Evan's tracks and pursued. He didn't run fast. He didn't have to. He led them toward the old quarry, where the ground was fractured and unreliable. As they closed in, he paused near a rusted mining cart, flipped open a false panel in the floor, and dropped the diamond shard inside, securing it within an insulated transmitter rig. Then he stood, arms raised. "Did you think this was about profit, Rusk?" he called as the men approached. Rusk stepped forward, gun visible at his side. "It's always about profit. That's what you never understood." "I understood it perfectly," Evan said. "I just chose a different currency." Above, Dina reached the uplink tower and plugged in the compass. The data uploaded in seconds, encrypted files, videos, signatures, coordinates. She watched the screen flicker with the final message, "Vault 2, confirmed." Activation triggered. Back at the quarry, Rusk raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the earth beneath him cracked. The vibrations were back, this time not from machines, from the ground itself. Something old was waking up, and diamonds, cut centuries ago, were beginning to speak. The earth didn't roar, it whispered. That was the most terrifying part. The cracks in the quarry floor didn't split with the thunderous drama of an earthquake. They simply unfolded, as though something beneath had been waiting, patient and aware, for its cue. Dust lifted like a breath, soft and grey, coating everything, in a slow-moving veil that blurred shapes and turned men into shadows. Rusk stepped back instinctively, boots slipping near the edge. His guards froze, weapons half raised, uncertain whether to shoot or run. Evan stood in the center, hands still, raised. Calm as a priest at the altar of collapse. "You want the truth buried," he said quietly, voice barely audible above the shifting gravel. "But it was buried long before you got here." Rusk moved fast then, closing the distance, the muzzle of his pistol meeting Evan's chest. "Where's the shard?" "Gone," Evan replied. Rusk's eyes twitched. "Who has it?" "Someone smarter than both of us." Far above, the uplink tower blinked green. Dina watched the upload reach completion. The moment the final packet cleared, she removed the compass and turned to flee, but found herself face to face with someone she hadn't expected. Warren Dietz, the financial auditor who wasn't due for another week. He was early. And he wasn't smiling. "I hoped it wouldn't be you," he said. She narrowed her eyes. "You're with him?" "No," Dietz said. "He's with me." He stepped aside to reveal a second figure, tall, grey-suited, and holding an old briefcase embossed with a golden crest. The emblem matched the one from the scrolls Evan had uncovered. The one Dinah now knew wasn't just decorative. "I represent the consortium," the man said. "And you've just made a very dangerous move." She clutched the compass tighter. "The data's out, you're too late." The man didn't flinch. "The data is irrelevant, the shards are what matter, and the one your partner carries isn't just a record. It's a trigger." Dina blinked. "A trigger for what?" But before he could answer, the uplink tower groaned, then shook. The screen flickered, and then it shut down. Not from overload, not from sabotage, from a signal sent internally. Something had responded. Back in the quarry, the ground gave a final shudder. Then silence. The dust cleared just enough for Rusk to see the edges of what had emerged. Stone teeth. A ring of carved columns rising from the earth, forming a shape unmistakable in geometry. A cut diamond, 20 meters wide, etched with lines, that glowed faintly like veins of fire beneath translucent skin. The vault had opened. Evan stepped forward. "You wanted a vault," he said. "There it is. Go on. Open it." Rusk hesitated, then nodded at one of the guards. The man approached, weapon raised, and touched the nearest column. Nothing happened. Then he pressed harder, still nothing. But when he reached for his radio to report back, the column hissed. A needle emerged from its side. Too fast, it pierced his glove. A drop of blood hit the surface, and the structure responded. The columns began to hum in harmony. The central platform sank slightly, revealing a core, dark, smooth, and pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Rusk stepped back, eyes wide. "What the hell is this?" Evan answered without looking at him. "It's not a vault, it's a beacon." And it had been activated. The glow pulsed once, twice, then again, a rhythm, 3 short bursts, a pause, then one long. A code. Not for humans, for someone or something else. Suddenly, every comms device in the camp came to life. Radios, laptops, GPS units, all blinking erratically, screens flooded with symbols no one recognized. Panic rippled through the crew. Tents collapsed as guards scrambled. Some tried to shut devices down. Others simply ran. The air felt electric. Dina arrived just as chaos peaked. She found Evan standing at the edge of the beacon, untouched by the panic. She didn't speak, just handed him the compass. He took it, turned it once, and the beacon silenced. Everything stopped. Not just the hum, not just the glow, the devices, the shaking, even the air. It was like someone had pressed pause on reality, then a voice. Not from a speaker, not from a throat, but from... The stone itself spoke. "You have cut the veil," it said in perfect toneless English. "Are you ready to see?" And the diamond at the beacon's heart opened. Not like a flower, like an eye. Inside was a single shard, smaller than Dinah's palm, faceted like a gem, but etched with microscopic circuitry, far beyond anything either of them had ever seen. Evan reached for it. Behind him, Rusk lunged. Dina moved first. She grabbed the pistol from the fallen guard near her feet and fired once, a warning shot, inches from Rusk's leg. He stopped cold. "This isn't yours anymore," she said. Evan retrieved the shard. The moment his skin touched it, images flashed. Through his mind, through hers, through everyone still standing near the structure. Cities made of stone and light, people whose bones glittered, machines that cut diamonds with sound. Histories carved into the earth like stories waiting to be told. Then silence again. When the vision ended, Evan was on his knees. Dinah knelt beside him. "What did it show you?" He looked at her, pale and shaking. "Where the other beacons are." "You mean there's more?" He nodded slowly. 7 total. This was the first and the smallest. Dietz and the suited man approached, slower now. Their faces had changed, not with fear, but with calculation. "We'll take it from here," the prey man said. "No," Evan replied. "You had your chance. The consortium buried this. Now the world knows." The man smiled coldly. "Then the world will forget again." But before he could act, a rumble shook the ground, soft but purposeful. The beacon responded, not to command. To intention. The inner vault began to close and the diamond eye shut, but not before Evan dropped the shard back inside. "No one owns this," he said. "Not anymore." The columns receded into the ground. The light died, and the earth, as if satisfied, sealed itself once more. Rusk was gone by nightfall, fled, disgraced, empty-handed. The consortium men vanished too, their threats whispered like old warnings no one would believe. But the data had spread. The files Evan and Dina uploaded had already been mirrored, archived, shared across a dozen networks. The truth was out, and yet the desert returned to quiet. The tents were packed, the dig was declared inconclusive, and Evan disappeared again. Dina received no messages, no calls, just a single package, weeks later. Inside, a rough, uncut diamond and a note. "Any diamond cutters in the tent?" 2 months later, the desert had swallowed the camp whole. The only traces of what had happened were faint tire ruts in the sand and a few broken tent stakes rusting under the sun. The beacon was gone, buried again by shifting terrain and bureaucratic silence. Officials had declared the site geologically unstable and locked it under international heritage protections, effectively erasing it from maps, reports, and public discourse. But for those who had seen, forgetting wasn't an option. Dina now worked from a nondescript office in Lisbon, analyzing satellite anomalies under a false name and encrypted servers. The data from the beacon had spread far faster than the consortium anticipated, fracturing into bits across underground networks, shared like a myth among coders, linguists, geologists, and old-world historians who swore they'd seen symbols like those before. But none of them had seen Evan since. That is, until the morning she stepped into her building and found a man waiting at her desk, clean-cut, suit-tailored, hair trimmed, face unmistakable. Evan Cartwright, no longer draped in dust and mystery, but standing like the billionaire he'd once been presumed to be. She stared at him for a long time before speaking. "So, you do clean up?" He smiled. "Had to remind a few people who they were dealing with. You vanished." "I had to. The shard wasn't the only thing they were after. It was just the loudest." She leaned against her desk, arms crossed. "Why now?" He stepped closer and placed a small object on the desk between them. A crystal shard, no larger than a marble, faceted and pulsing faintly. "This one wasn't in the vault," he said. "It responded to the others after activation. Hidden. In a private collection in Geneva? A museum didn't even know what it had, but when the beacon opened, it lit up." She lifted it gently, feeling the same strange hum she remembered. "There's more, isn't there?" she asked. He nodded. "There are 6 others, 1 per continent. The original diamond cutters weren't just artisans. They were messengers, archivists. This was their warning system and their record. Of what?" He looked out the window toward the Atlantic. "Of what we've forgotten, or chosen to forget." She waited, sensing he hadn't come just to deliver a shard. "I'm not rebuilding the dig," he said. "Not the way it was. No more corporate investors, no more consortium spies. I want a crew, small, trusted, quiet. You'd lead it." She shook her head slowly. "I'm not who I was out there. None of us are," he said. "But you saw the code, you understood it. That shard only talks to people like you now." She laughed softly. "People like me? People who still ask the right question. Why bury a message in a diamond?" They stood in silence a moment. She turned the shard in her hand, watching the reflections dance like constellations. There were choices to make, maps to trace, history to unravel, and danger too. Always danger, but she nodded. "I'll need 2 weeks," he smiled. "I'll give you 3. As he turned to leave, she stopped him. "Evan, that question you asked the night everything changed. Why that one? Why ask if there were any diamond? Cutters in the tent?" He paused in the doorway. "Because it wasn't a question," he said. "It was a password." Then he walked out, leaving behind the shard, the silence, and the kind of unfinished sentence that only ever ends in discovery. And, somewhere beneath another patch of dirt and dust, another beacon waited to blink awake.